In this video, I'm going to be walking through our objectives, metrics, measurement, and monitoring crosswalk for ISO 42001, ISO 27001, the High Trust AI security certification, and this is also applicable to any other standard or framework that you need to comply with. For background, I'm Walter Haydock, the founder and CEO of StackAware, and we help AI-powered companies measure and manage risk. So the reason that we put this together is that various standards, the ones that I mentioned, have differing requirements when it comes to things that you need to track. 42001 and 27001 have measurement and monitoring requirements, as well as the obligation to set up objectives for the organization. The High Trust AI security certification also has specific requirements that need to be met in order to get the certification for your systems. And what we have done is combine these various requirements into a single document that can track all of them so that there's no need to flip between various different sources. On this initial tab, we've got some background information, some FAQs that explain where to go to view the various foundational sources, and just give you an overview of what this document accomplishes. Moving over to the changelog, we've listed out the specific sections, the clauses of the ISO standards that are addressed here, and then the High Trust AI security certification ones are too numerous to list here, but they are listed in the individual measures and metrics screen, which we will go to next. So what we have here is a list of 59 different metrics and measures, and these are numbered from 1 to 60. We skipped number 2. Not sure why, but we deleted a row in our database, so that's why that's there. So in terms of these numbers are completely arbitrary, and your organization can use them. You can create your own numbers. You can delete this. No, this is just completely for tracking purposes. We track all these for our clients in our back end as part of our delivery process, but you can use whatever naming convention you would like. As far as the ISO objective ID, this ties back to Annex C of ISO 42001, which proposes a set of sample objectives for an organization as they relate to AI governance. As you can see, the titles are security, accountability, availability and quality of training and test data, but these are not mandatory, and you can create your own objectives. We've just used the out-of-the-box 42001s here. The next column is the applicable requirements section, and these are the specific High Trust AI security assessment with certification requirements that are being measured and monitored in this sheet. And you can add additional frameworks that are applicable here. And we just didn't apply the various clauses of ISO 42001 and 27001 because they apply to all of these entries. So didn't want to clutter this sheet, but you could if you want. The next column is the metric and measure title. So this is a high-level summary of each specific metric or measure that you're going to be analyzing. And then the metric or measure itself is located here. These are all taken from the High Trust AI security certification, and they are hard requirements of the standard. If you would like to get to the measured or managed levels of the High Trust CSF, you do need to have specific quantitative criteria that you are observing in order to meet those levels of the CSF. You just need to have them implemented if you want to get to the implemented level, which is kind of the minimum standard for the High Trust CSF. Under resources required, this is something that 42001 and 27001 require you to elaborate on. So explaining what sort of things you need in place to facilitate the accomplishment of the specific goal or to support your achievement of the relevant metric or measure. Accountable role, this is the person or job title for whom you will look to ensure that the metric or measure is actually being met or is within the organizational tolerances. Data collection role, this is just the person who's sampling the information, who's providing the providing the analysis of it. And this person could be the same person as in the accountable role. However, their relationship will drive whether this is an operational or independent metric, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Data collection frequency, self-explanatory. Evaluation criteria, these are the exact steps required in order to get the measurement or metric. This should be completely prescriptive and clear. There should be no ambiguity in terms of what the steps are required. Data collection recording location, this is required by various standards just to list out where you are storing the results of these metrics and measures. We store them in the same sheet. It's just one tab over, which we'll look at in a moment. But if you store them somewhere else, then you would indicate that here. The review role, this is the person who's reviewing the data collection role, reviewing that person's work. And the review frequency is telling you the interval with which the reviewer will look at the data collector's work. So it could be annually for both. It could be quarterly for data collection and annually for review. This is up to you, except for the fact you probably don't want the review frequency to be more frequent than the data collection frequency. On operational versus independent, this metric, I'm actually going to move over here because it is dependent on the relationship between the accountable and the data collection role. So if the person who is collecting the data is the same person as the person who's accountable for the information, then that would be an operational metric. Or if the person who's collecting the data has some sort of reporting relationship to the person who's accountable. So security analyst in this situation would not be reporting to the chief information officer, assuming that the security organization is separate from the CIO's organization. So this would be an independent metric. But if a security analyst worked for the chief information security officer, then this would be an operational metric rather than an independent one. All right, so review frequency, we talked about that. The final section of this sheet shows the target lower bound count and unit and the target upper bound count and unit. The target lower bound is the minimum acceptable threshold, below which, if the metric drops for ISO 27001 and 42001, this would cause a nonconformity, which would require you to address it. And then for the upper bound, if the metric exceeds this upper bound, then that would also cause a nonconformity. So it depends how you frame these, and basically, most metrics or measures could be framed as having a lower or upper bound. We've done both throughout the sheet just to give you an idea of how that works. So we'll look at some of the, if we look at the upper bound here, for example, if you look at the metric and measure, it's output encoding being applied to prevent injection attacks. And the way you evaluate this metric or measure is look at the total number of systems within your sample that have outputted prohibited characters during a red teaming evaluation or penetration test. So that's obviously a bad thing. You don't want to exceed that. So we set the upper bound to be 10%. So if greater than 10% or 10% or greater of your systems are outputting forbidden characters during a red team or penetration test, that would trigger a nonconformity. But, we're not expecting perfection here. So if it's 5%, for example, then you'd be okay. You'd be within your tolerances. The final thing to look at is the target completion and achieved. These are specific for one-time projects that are not necessarily continuing. It's kind of you either achieved it or you haven't. You set the target date here. So this would be January 1st of 2026. We currently have not achieved it. So that's the status here. And the metric measure we're looking at is maintaining a documented inventory of deployed AI systems, and it has various requirements here. So what this would do is this would allow you to track one-time efforts, and then eventually at the conclusion of the project, you would probably create a new metric to confirm that you're staying, you're keeping all your assets in your inventory and updated, but that would be a separate metric or measure to avoid any sort of confusion. And you could say we are done with this specific effort, and then you can track a different metric or measure over time. So that is the objectives, metrics, and measures sheet. And what we're going to look at next is the results sheet. And this is where you evaluate the outputs of the metrics or measures, or the results. So what we have here, this is just arbitrary numbering here for each result. This is the date that the result was taken. The data collector user ID at StackAware, we use pseudonymous user IDs so that with our public documentation, we're not tying this back to people's actual identities. That information we keep confidential. But if this whole sheet is just for internal use, then you could write someone's name, you could write their user ID, email, whatever your standard operating procedure is. The organization metric and measure ID column, this ties back to the first sheet. So for example, if you go to, let's just do metric measure ID 1, this is saying that on April 7th of 2025, we looked at this one measure, and the result was 80%. So we'll go back here. We'll check out this sheet. So the key or the requirement is that policies include AI considerations. All the AI policies all the organization's policies need to track all of these things. And we're saying, our target lower bound count was 100% because we control our policies. So they should be, we should be perfectly in compliance in terms of our own requirements for policies because we write them. But this is saying that, no, we were only at 80% on this date. So to reach the managed level of high trust, of the high trust CSF, you need to have a risk treatment process in place. So this ties the specific, failure from a metric and measure perspective, because you're below the threshold, to a given risk ID. So actually, we're down here on metric and measure ID 1. So this would trigger a risk, that would be in your register. That would something you would track over time, and it would also be a nonconformity under your AI management system or information security management system for 42,001 or 27,001. And your risk ID, would tie to your risk register, so you could track it there and have a fully documented process for your compliance needs. And now, after when this metric hits 100, that's your target. So then the risk, disappears at that point. It's no longer relevant because there's no risk because you've met the requirements of your metrics and measures. So hopefully that's been helpful in laying out how this sheet works and tying together various compliance and privacy standards. So thank you very much for your time. And if you need help in developing your AI management system for ISO 42001 readiness purposes, then please reach out to StackAware today. Thanks. Bye.